is your situation?
Hello. I think one of my students is being abused.
Okay, thank you for calling. Who am I speaking with?
Pastor Tom, she's a student in our youth group.
Okay, okay. Is the child in immediate danger or harm?
I don't think so. Not at this moment. But she was really afraid to go home tonight.
Okay. What is the child's name?
Her name's Amber.
And how old is Amber?
13.
Okay. Do your best to explain to me what you have been seen or told.
Yeah. Well, Amber came to my wife and I at church tonight, and she was upset. She seemed nervous about telling us something, and she told me that her stepdad had been hurting her.
Okay. Did she give you any details of the incident?
Yeah, a little bit. She said that he gets angry, especially when he drinks a little bit. He loses his temper sometimes, and well, when this happens, he gets violent. I guess it got real when I actually saw, a bruise on her arm. It looked like fingerprints, kind of like somebody grabbed her arm pretty intensely. And she said it happened a few days ago.
Are they all living in the same home?
Yes.
Okay. What's the stepdad's name?
Joe.
And how many children live in the home?
As far as I know, it's just Amber and her brother Tucker. He's kindergarten, so I think he's around 5 years old.
Okay. Are there any other adults in the house?
Just their mom, Anne, I believe. Anne's her name.
Do you know of any weapons?
Not sure.
Is the alleged perpetrator affiliated with any gangs that you know of?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay. And are the kids at home with the alleged perpetrator right now?
I'm not totally sure. Probably. I mean, it's 9:30 on a Wednesday, so I mean, I would guess, yeah.
Okay. Are there any other witnesses to this abuse?
Not that I'm aware of. It's just the family at home. I don't think anybody knew this was happening.
Okay. And have local police been contacted yet, sir?
No, this is, like I said, the first time, so I just called you first.
Okay. A report is being filed and we may be in contact in the future for more information. And Tom,
Yeah.
you did the right thing.
What you just heard, obviously, is an enactment of a youth pastor getting involved. He saw a circumstance, he saw something that could have been unhealthy. He wasn't sure how to respond, but he understood that he is a part of that group we call mandatory reporters who must report an incident that could possibly be destructive to the child. There's a number of people in that. We have a police officer here who would report. Dr. Moreland, a doctor who would have to report. Sometimes the report comes from the ER and the nurse makes the call. Sometimes it's a teacher who sees something. But somewhere, somebody has to see it and not ignore it. Somebody has to recognize it and be willing to get involved. It's kind of like the Good Samaritan. Remember, he was the Good Samaritan. The other two didn't have good in front of their name because they walked by the incident and didn't get involved. And the Good Samaritan, there's even a Good Samaritan law that I'm not going to teach law today, but the idea is we should be willing to get involved. And who should be quicker to get involved than the church? Most people don't want to get involved because they know once they get involved, like the Good Samaritan, it's going to end up costing them something. It's going to take time away from their day. It's going to cause them to have conversations they're uncomfortable with. Their biggest concern is they're going to make a report that's going to hinder the relationship they have. And so there's all these struggles that are going on in their mind, but nothing happens till someone gets involved. Sometimes it's a neighbor, sometimes it's a family member. But somebody starts the process and makes the call because there is abuse or neglect or some present or extreme potential danger to the child. Well, once the call is made, once someone from one of these leader groups or some other group makes a call, then that responsibility goes to a CPS worker. Now, let me help you with the letters and the initials as we go through the process. CPA is Child Protective Services. And so someone in that group now is notified, and then so let's go over to Catherine, and we're going to take the whole group with us because poor Catherine has a difficult job. Now, we have celebrated CPS workers today, but what does a CPS worker do? Well, she represents the government, and she has a little authority and a whole lot of responsibility. And she has some very difficult decisions to make. She really, first of all, has to evaluate the circumstance. She listens to what he said. She has to do an investigation. She goes into the home. She meets the parents, let's say, of the phone call. She talks to the mama. She talks to the daddy. She talks to the daughter. Everybody is really not happy that she's there. It's not like, oh, we're so glad you came. We were just hoping you would show up tonight. And yet her responsibility is not to make the daddy happy, who's probably already had a couple of beers and is already a little bit less than sharp, and mama, who is desperately concerned that if his income and he's not there, she couldn't even feed the kids. You understand, this is not simple. And yet she's there for the purpose of the child and to do what's best for that child. She has to, first of all, make a decision. You heard Care Portal spoken of a while ago. If when she gets in, are you still with me? Say amen, just so I know. Because they got the lights where I can't see you, but I know you're there. And so what happens is sometimes the situation is there's an infestation of roaches and mice, and it's just the living environment is just terrible. It's just not healthy. Sometimes there's a lot of things that lead into that. Poverty creates a lot of issues. Sometimes it's something that with just a little help from the community, especially the church community, we can fix it. Sometimes we've had, and so what she can do as a CPS worker is go online and send out a message saying, we have a home that has issues, but it's not abuse in the sense of a threat by someone in the house to the child. It's just the very environment is a threat. Or maybe they just don't have the equipment they need. They don't have car seats, or they don't have whatever it may be. And she can go online and say, can somebody help? And that message goes out to people that are connected to the Care Portal process in our local churches. And then a church can say, hey, we can furnish car seats. We can get somebody over there and we'll pay for them to come treat that house and get rid of those bugs. We can do whatever it may be. A lot of times it's a physical fix that can keep the child with the family. Isn't that incredible? But it can't happen if she doesn't have a place or a way to connect it. And that's what the Care Portal does. It creates an incredible connection between the CPS worker on site and what is needed that can possibly be the help. Sometimes, I don't want to stay too long in this spot. We have other spots. But sometimes the poor mother's working as a waitress somewhere, and she's been leaving the kids alone, and that's dangerous. That's not right. But she doesn't have a way to pay for daycare. She doesn't have enough money to hire help, and she finds herself trying to decide, do I go to work to feed the kids, or do I stay home and lose the house we live in? And she's in those stressful circumstances. But we can get on Care Portal, and we've had churches say, bring the kids to our daycare, we'll scholarship them. Bring this, bring that. And things begin to happen, but we can't do it if we're not aware and if the church isn't connected to the Care Portal process. And by the way, Care Portal is a great place to get involved. Keep up with that. All right. Now, once she decides, though, that it's not something the Care Portal can fix, that it's worse than that, she now has to decide whether or not the child should be removed. If removal is necessary, then she's got some more decisions to make. She's got a lot of decisions to make. I don't want to be her. God bless y'all. All right? She has to decide if their child's going to be removed, can she find kinship care? Someone kin to the child. That's always the first hope, that we keep the child in the family, just not in that immediate circumstance of family. And so they begin to look. Who do you have? Where's your mama? Who's your daddy? What's going on? Do you have a sister? Is there someone in the family? And all of this begins. Can you imagine the decisions that have to be made? And then they have to decide whether or not they qualify. And in the meantime, where do we put the child until we see if they qualify? And then are y'all still with me? Because then she's got to ask, what level of trauma have these kids been through? Can we move them toward a home that's ready just for a normal child that knows how to go to school, take care of life? Or has this child been so traumatized that they need special care in this moment? All of that is going on in a short period of time, and they must find a way to answer those questions and move forward. They'll teach you how you do that. That's about I think a 4-year degree. So we're not going to try to do that right now. Now, once that's done, and once they've been removed, and the children have to go somewhere, and kinship care is not the option, not immediately for sure, they then have to call a CPA. Now, that is not a certified public accountant. When I began to hear these terms, I thought, boy, they're really about the money, aren't they? Because everything they do, they want to call a CPA and see if they can't make sure the numbers add up. They said, no, Pastor, that's not what that is. That's a child placement agency. Now, this is something I had not learned before. So we're going to go to Nikki. Nikki represents all the child placement agencies in the entire state of Texas. Today, she's with Cherished Impressions, and we appreciate the agency she has, but she represents all of them today because we couldn't put them all up here. We just thought she was so pretty, she would represent everyone. So we have Nikki. Now, what do they do? Well, you may not get this. I didn't understand that what we have is the state actually contracts agencies under contract with the state who have to be licensed in order to even ask for the contract. And the process they have to go through to get licensed and the training and all that they have is extensive. Once they get the license, then they can ask for a contract with the state. And when those are in place, then they have something they do to help the process. Because CPS is involved in the removal piece. What a CPA does, a child placement agency, is go out and recruit and train and license the families who will receive the kids or actually serve as a foster parent. So the CPA, she has to find somebody, some family that will say, we will go through the process, jump through all the hoops, allow you to invade our space, to ask me questions that I would normally not let someone else ask, to make me learn and go through classes and go through a process and put all that time and effort so that you can finally say that I can be trusted with a child that has been now in the control of the state, would be put in my house, and I'll be found. So it's not easy. Some people say, well, it's just too hard. Why don't they just I'm a good parent, let me have the child. Look at my kids. They turned out all right. And then we look at your kids and say, that's why no, I don't go there. And so, no, you have great kids. But what we see is this reality that somebody has to manage that. And so the state actually contracts these other folks to manage that part of the process. Are you still with me? Is this getting clearer all the time, like mud, right? And so the CPA does this work to prepare the families. And they have the job of not only recruiting the families, they must do the research to make sure the families qualify, including in-home visits and all kinds of stuff. And some families say, that's just so invasive. Let me tell you, I didn't say getting involved was going to be easy. I didn't say getting involved was going to be simple. Matter of fact, it's difficult. But the kids, we all need to know the kids are in qualified homes. Amen? And so this involved process requires that we go from the CPS to the CPA. Now, where is the CPA going to get all these families? I'm gonna veer off my notes just a little bit here. Last Friday night, I sat with a prosecuting attorney who works for the Attorney General. She's she's my brother's sister-in-law, and we were all at dinner together. And I was asking her questions, and I began to ask CPS questions about kids. She's been involved a lot with human trafficking. And she said, you know, most of the people, the majority, over 70% of young ladies that are involved in human trafficking come from CPS. 70%. She said, but it's not a hard shift for them. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, most of those girls, when we go out and rescue them and we think we've done something good, they say to us, listen, our whole life in CPS, somebody was paid to have us in their home. We didn't get treated the same as their kids. We weren't loved like their kids. We were money in their pocket. So what's the difference? At least with a pimp, we get nice clothes, good food, and are treated special. That's their response. Listen, folks, we've got to break that cycle. And who better to break the cycle than people who are helping the kids not for the paycheck, but for the passion of God in their heart to love and deliver these kids from that kind of system. So it's the churches is the best place because we have been regenerated by salvation, by the Lord Jesus Christ. We've been changed. We understand this. We get it, and we understand the call of God. So that's where we have the CPA. Now, what's the goal of CPA? First of all, the family unit is always the key. One of the things we say all the time in our process is keep the family first. The thing that God did first in the garden was make a family. He made a mom and a dad, and then he let them go have kids. And the idea of God has always been family. Family has all the right dynamic. Family has all the right support. Family has everything necessary when the family's healthy to raise a healthy child. Family is always the best way. I have no issues with orphanages. I appreciate their work. But it's still best if a child can be put inside a healthy family that can show them not only can they support come, but they can know how to be family because they've been in family when they move on into life. Family is best. Family first is always the hope. So we want to do something. One of the things we want to do is we want to, as a church, start helping restore the broken family so the child can go home. Is that making sense? We want to go back into that family. Now I know that most of the time, often, I don't know most, it's probably too strong, but often that family is already diminished down to a working mother, or maybe to a mother with a drug problem, or maybe to a mother, and on we could go. And often it's just the mom. We've already seen it. But single moms can make pretty good families if they're connected to a really good church. If they've got the support of the church, they can do this at a level they could not do it otherwise. So my question is, where's the church in that? We have got to decide we want to be a part of the family that the child, y'all just stay there. But way back over here, there was something wrong with the family, which is why the child had to be removed. Well, maybe while the child is in the safety of a CPA family that has been produced in foster care, maybe while they're there, the church can come over here and help this person fix their issue and get this family restored so the child won't be permanently in the system, but brought back into a family that's been changed through the power of Jesus Christ and a healthy church. You still with me, right? So this is the whole process. So we want it in family. Now, Nolan and you guys, y'all are the perfect family. That's what we decided. So that's why you're here. And they really are. I mean, you don't know them, but they're perfect. And I'm very proud. So they represent that. But if that family can't be repaired, then our goal is that, and if they can't find kinship care that's qualified and will do a good job, our goal is that they end up being adopted permanently. That we stop the system, we stop the cycle. We stop. I was in 8 homes growing up. I was in 12 homes. I was in 13 homes. There's even laws that limit, and I appreciate the fact that there's laws that limit how many homes a child can go into. The problem I have with the law is that could leave them stuck in a home they need to be removed from. So we have to be careful, because some laws meant for one thing end up causing another that's not good. And it's a struggle. What do? I tell you what we do is we get involved. And we involve ourselves with the kids with a willingness to not just have them pass through, but live with us forever and adopt them on a permanent basis. So we get to this family piece. Now, who's going to make all the decisions about the kid? Well, it's a legal matter. It's a legal matter. So that means we have to go to court. Hello, Judge. So we have to go to court. Now, when we come to court, what does that have? So this whole family, everybody's involved in court. The CPS is involved in court. The CPA is involved in the court. All the kids are involved in the court. We've got all these people involved helping this judge. Ultimately, our goal is to make a right decision. I'll never forget what the judge said to me that day at lunch. He said, when I first became a family court judge, it wasn't something I wanted to do. It wasn't like when I became a lawyer and started the process, became a judge, that I wanted to be family court judge. He said it was kind of an unusual turn of events that landed me in that seat. He said, but I went home one day so happy. I actually told my wife, I think I found my calling. He said, because today, he said, there was this family that came in. The mama was so messed up. She was so hooked on drugs. She was prostituting herself. She was doing all these things, and it was a terrible environment. And today, I removed that child from her, and we've put that child into the system so that child can have safety and security and have a hope and a future. He said, I was so proud of my decision that I said to my wife, you know what? I was able to do something today that made a difference for somebody. I like my job. He said, the problem was that 17 years later, when I was having to remove a child from the child I had removed from that mother. And I said to myself, the system didn't work. I took her out of a broken home and put her into a broken system. He looked at me that day and he said, you know, the problem is if the system had been filled up with the church and Christians who knew how to raise that child, and from the very beginning, if that child had been in the right loving home, we'd have got a different result. He said it wasn't really the system as so much that was broke, it was who was involved in the system and who was not involved in the system. See, our goal is, if these kids have to come to this family, that this family is going to raise them right. Now, that judge has to make that decision. He has to make the decision. And he's sitting up there, and all he has is different people giving him their opinion of the circumstance, and he's got this incredibly difficult decision. Can I ask you, here's one thing I'd like to see the church do. Get involved in praying for the judges. Praying for wisdom, praying for divine direction. These are difficult decisions they have to make. So we're praying for the judgment. But who's going to represent the child? Because you got the family on one side, and they're trying to say that the CPS worker had no business taking our child because we're really a better family. She just caught us on a bad day. Normally. And then we can't believe that person called. And all of that is going on. But somebody needs to represent the child. And so that's why we have that Spanish word for house, casa. Because what casa really is, casa is actually a court-appointed special advocate to represent the child. That's a volunteer position. You know where we need to get involved, church? There's you another place. Volunteer to be a CASA worker and represent the child. We'll train you. We'll help you. CASA will help you know, and you'll become the representative of that child. The court can then appoint you to that child. Maybe more than one child would be our hope, and that you can help those children, and you get to watch out for them, get to know them, get comfortable with everybody on both sides of the aisle involved in their life, and help the judge make a good decision. But that's not all. There's another thing that's brand new. It's already up and running, and it's just been kicked off in Denton, the newest chapters in Denton, and we call it Clergy in Court for Kids. And this is where ministers are being brought together with the local judge in their area who oversees the family court. And he meets with them and they with him. They pray together, they talk together, and then they take turns on the day that it's family court day, being there to help him, to pray with him before he goes in, to be there to minister to the families who are in such traumatic difficulty. And then at the end of it, they can get to know families, touch families, help families, which brings us back over to that chair. And it's incredible. And then he meets with them monthly, and then they can say, this is what's happening in the families we're working with. This is what's happening with the kids. And again, the community church gets involved in what's going on in the families of the community through this process. It's another place we can get involved. But ultimately, like it or not, these kids... Aren't these the prettiest little girls you've ever seen? I think you all they're just gorgeous, gorgeous young ladies. The young man's handsome, though. I mean, he's not pretty, but he is handsome. I'll give him that. I don't think pretty works for him. Ultimately, though, they all turn 18. Now, I guess, I don't like this picture, but this is a reality. When they turn 18, families that have had them there for the money stops coming, and so they call CPS and say, come get him or come get her. They're 18 now, and the checks have stopped flowing. We put all their stuff in a trash sack, and they set them out, and they pick them up, and then where are they going to take them? Very difficult. There aren't many places. Often, they end up in a shelter. They've become self-reliant usually at some level by now, but a shelter is still a tough place to go when you're 18 years old and all by yourself. From the shelter, homelessness, they don't like the shelter, so they try to make it on their own, and they end up either homeless or they end up involved in something illegal, and that leads to what the other guy at the table told me. He said, Pastor, do you know that every year when we're trying to determine how many beds we're going to need in the Texas prison system, we make that determination based on how many kids are going to age out of foster care? Because we know that a huge percentage of them, we can almost guarantee the numbers, are within a few years of being in prison. Can you imagine if you have children that have turned 18? How many of you know that at 18 they weren't grown yet? They may not have known it, but you did. And you know that the college process or whatever line of direction they took years before they were ready. And sometimes even after they get married, they will be out on their own and sell their house and move back in with you. I've heard of that. In my house, I've heard of it 3 times. My kids are here, and I love them, and that was so good that they came back, and they had us. And I was so glad they could come back to us while they were building a nicer house, and they sold the other house, and they could live free at my house and save all that money for the next house. I am so glad that I could do that for them. I am glad that as good as that was for them, how is it that we expect this 18-year-old to get by without family support? See, it's just not good. It's not good for him. It's not good for society. It's not good. And so that's why the girls end up finding a pimp. That's why they end up on the street. That's why they try something illegal that lands them in prison. This is it. So because of that, and you know, there's 1,200 to 1,500 a year that are aging out. And And that's why we have phased in that you heard Kyle speak of. That's why we have Buckner has now they don't call it phased in, but for kids who age out, a place for them to go at Buckner's Children's Home. That's why other places are popping up to say we got to stop this. See, I want to wrap up what I want to say with these remarks, and then we'll talk about we'll talk about what I want you to do next, what I hope you will want to do next. But in this process, I picture it like a river, and this is right here where the dam on the end of the river is, and it flows over into a waterfall, and this is where we're losing them. And from here, they go to prison or homeless or any of those other. It's all here. This is terrible. And so what we're doing, one of the things we're doing is we're building phased in. We're building what Buckner's doing, what others are doing. We're building a place to catch them right here at the end, and we need to. But somebody asked, it's good to get them out of the river, but where did they fall in the river? And so as we begin to move back upstream, we say, wow, wouldn't it have been better if right here we'd have had the right family process so that that's where it stopped? They get to a good family, and that's the end of that. We stick with them, and the judge says, that's a good family, and none of those qualify, and so you can adopt, and we say, and we will, and they become forever our children, and they have a forever home. When they're 50, they've still got a mom and dad. It starts, so we need to come up here. But wouldn't it also be good if we could come all the way back up here and fix the home? Who has been called to do this? The church. Christians. Jesus is clear. So what we have to do is get involved. We can't just pray about it. You need to pray about it. But I can tell you what God's going to say, because when Bishop had me up over that desk and I was praying, I heard what God was saying. And he was saying, why do you need to pray about this? I've already told you, you have to get involved.